Good evening, everyone. I hope that you guys are doing well. My name is Pedro Ramirez, and I am the English teacher assistant here at La Universidad Cooperativa de Colombia. I am from Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is the capital of the United States. Um, I heard that you guys have an upcoming assignment in which you have to promote an Airbnb. So today I am going to talk to you about my hypothetical Airbnb located in my hometown, which is Washington, D.C. I chose the Airbnb to be located in Washington, D.C. because this is the city that I know best. This is my native city, this is my hometown. So I can, you know, potentially sell my Airbnb, so promote it very well if I know the place. So I highly recommend you guys, if you guys want to do a different city, um, to get some background information on that city that you're doing if you are going to do a city that you're not familiar with. But if you guys are doing your hometown, that will be even better because you guys will know what to do. You guys will know what to recommend and how to sell your Airbnb. So, before I delve deep into my hypothetical Airbnb, I would like to talk about one key vocabulary word, which is accommodation. So, what is accommodation? So, an accommodation is a place where tourists stay in. So, an accommodation is a place where people who are traveling for a few days to a different city, to a new place, to a new country, they can stay in for a few days. So, an accommodation can range from a hotel, it can range from a hostel, a chatlet, a and of course an Airbnb, which is the topic that we will be focusing on today. So let's begin. I am going to talk about my hypothetical Airbnb. So, my Airbnb is located in the city of Washington, D.C. My Airbnb is located in the neighborhood of Columbia Heights. Columbia Heights is a neighborhood that is predominantly Hispanic. Um, However, Columbia Heights has a lot of diversity. It has a lot of restaurants nearby, and it is also very close to the downtown area of Washington, D.C. As I said before, Columbia Heights offers a variety of restaurants ranging from Peruvian food, Chinese food, Salvadorian food, Guatemalan food, Honduran food, food from the Philippines, Vietnamese food, and many more. So, if you guys would like to stay in a place that offers a variety of foods and cultures, Columbia Heights is the place for you to stay in. My Airbnb has a cost of $70 a day, which is pretty cheap comparing it to your typical hotel room that may cost you $150. Columbia Heights, it's one bus away from the downtown area of Washington, D.C. Taking the bus is very easy. The buses, they usually are very consistent. They pass in a time frame of 10 to 15 minutes. So if you guys would like to take a bus to the downtown area, you just have to wait 15 minutes. You can either pay with card or you can pay the $2 fare of the bus. So in the downtown area, I recommend you to go to the most famous landmark of Washington, D.C., which is the White House. The White House is the place where the President of the United States lives in. The White House is basically the most beautiful house in Washington, D.C. It is, well kept. The grass is cut meticulously. There's a lot of security surrounding the White House. It is very touristic and it is also very beautiful. So I highly recommend you guys to go to the White House and take a picture in front of the White House because this is a landmark of Washington, D.C. So near the White House, we have the United States Capitol. The United States Capitol is another beautiful building with beautiful architecture, and it is also near to the White House. So at a walking distance, so if you guys would like to go on foot to the Capitol, you will basically have to walk for about 10 to 15 minutes. The Capitol, the United States Capitol, is where the Senate, the House of Representatives, they meet and they pass laws. Um, Next to the Capitol, we have the Supreme Court Justice. So this is another place that is very governmental. You have basically the highest court next to the Capitol. So if any law in the United States is, being passed or is trying to get revoked, it has to go through the Supreme Court. As you guys may know, Washington, D.C. is the mecca of politics. So anything that is relating to politics happens in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is also a cosmopolitan city. So that means that Washington, D.C. has a variety of cultures and a variety of languages. So Washington, D.C. is a diverse place where a lot of people can, peer. A lot of people can peer into different cultures and different languages. Washington, D.C. is diverse linguistically and culturally. So I highly recommend you guys to visit Washington, D.C. Another thing that, you know, emphasize or another thing that makes Washington, D.C. unique is that Washington, D.C. is the city of monuments and museums. So the first monument that is very famous and is very touristic, and it is also at a walking distance from the White House. I think that the walking distance from the White House to this monument, which is the Abraham Lincoln Memorial, is about 7 to 10 minutes. So on foot, if you would like to walk, it would take you 7 to 10 minutes to get to this monument. Abraham Lincoln Memorial is very beautiful. The architecture of this monument, it has a Western oriented architecture. You have columns. As you guys may know, columns, they were originated from Greece, so ancient Greece. So this architecture was inspired by the ancient Greece architecture. Inside the Abraham Lincoln Memorial, you can see a big statue of Abraham Lincoln sitting on a chair. It looks very beautiful. It is a, admirable piece of sculpture. This is a place that I highly recommend you guys to visit, and I will say that you have to take a picture in front of this. It's so beautiful. And as you guys may know, or if you guys do not know, Abraham Lincoln was a president from the United States. He was very significant in the history of the United States because he was the president who eradicated slavery. So in front of the Abraham Lincoln Memorial, we have the Washington Monument. So the Washington Monument, it is the tallest entity in Washington, D.C. So it is the tallest building in Washington, D.C. It looks like a needle. So in Spanish, people call it aguja because it looks like a needle. A needle is una aguja. So it is very beautiful. You can take an elevator all the way up to the monument, and you can see a bird's eye view of the whole city of Washington, D.C. So this monument was named after George Washington, who was also a president. He was actually the first president of the United States. He is the guy who appears on the first dollar bill. On the $1 bill. So near to the Washington Monument, we have the famous cherry blossom. So the cherry blossom, it is a basically there's a lot of trees that are near to the Washington monuments that during the springtime, so in the spring season, this will be in the months of March, at the end of March and at the beginning of April, the trees they start to bloom again. So spring, they start producing new leaves. So when these trees they start producing their leaves again, they bloom in a different color, and the color is pink. It is very beautiful. It is really famous. It is one of the most famous events in Washington, D.C. that takes place in March. Many people travel long distances just to come and take a picture in front of this beautiful landscape. So actually, the fun fact about these trees is that all of these trees they're not from DC. They're not from Washington, DC. They are from Japan. So these trees were a gift from Japan to the United States to commemorate a friendship after World War II. So next to, or really near by the Washington Monument, we have another memorial, which is the Thomas Jefferson Memorial. Thomas Jefferson was the second president of the United States, so he also has a memorial to commemorate how significant he was for the history of the United States. I highly recommend you guys to visit all the memorials, all the monuments, because they are really close to each other. You can literally go sightseeing. So sightseeing is a word that basically describes that you are going to the touristic attractions in the city. So you guys can visit all the monuments and all the memorials in one day because they are really close to each other. So the next thing that we have is the National Mall. So I know that many people when they hear the word mall, they think of a shopping center. They think of a big place that has a lot of stores, and you can buy clothes, you can buy food, you can buy electronics. But in this case, the National Mall, is different. We do not have any stores in the National Mall. We do not have any, souvenirs or things like that nearby. This is called the National Mall because it is a place that has a lot of monuments nearby, and it is a place that has a lot of museums. As you guys can see in the picture, the National Mall is this big open space that you guys see. So next to this big open space, you have the museums and you have the monuments. So this is known as the National Mall. So this is also a very beautiful place for people to hang out. A lot of people go to the National Mall and they read a book, they have a picnic, they even get sunbathe. So sunbathe is when you just put a towel on the grass and then you lie down and then you just enjoy the sun. I don't know. You get like a little tan. You would like to get a little bit tanner. So this is the National Mall. It's very beautiful. It is also very safe. In Washington D.C., one of my favorite things to do is to go to the downtown area. So this is the downtown area, and go and see the monuments. Even though I have been to those monuments like a lot of times already, I like to go to the monuments because it is very safe, it is very peaceful, and it is very fun to hang out with your friends. So actually, I have hung out in the national monuments at night, during the day, and in the morning. And throughout the whole day, at any time, it is safe for you to walk around the National Mall and close to the monuments. So, as I mentioned, Washington, D.C. is the city of monuments and museums. So, the first museum that you guys have to visit when you visit Washington, D.C., is the National Museum of African American History and Culture. So, this museum, aside from having a beautiful and modern architecture, it has a lot of history relating to African American people. So, as you guys may know, Washington, D.C., and throughout the whole United States during the 1800s, a slavery was something prevalent. A slavery was something that lasted for a few hundred, a few decades. A slavery lasted a few decades in the United States, and African American people were subject to this injustice of being slaves to white people. So back in the day, in the 1800s, if your skin was black, you did not have any rights. You were considered a property of people who had white skin. So if you were black during the 1800s, you were not seen as a human being. You were seen as property of a white person. So this museum, it talks a lot about the history of slavery, the history of African American people in the United States, and all the injustices that they had to withstand in the country. So I highly recommend you guys to visit this museum. It is free, and it is also very interesting, educational, and engaging. So the next thing that Washington, D.C. offers is the National Gallery of Art. So the National Gallery of Art is a place that you have a lot of paintings, you have a lot of pictures, and you have a lot of sculptures. As you guys can see, this is a very beautiful place. You guys can walk around the National Gallery of Art and admire paintings, look at art. Art is something very beautiful to look at. It is something very pleasing to the eye. So it is also something that, it gives you solace when you look at it. And in this is my favorite place to visit because it just calms me down. If I'm having like a terrible week, or if I'm having a bad day, I can just go to this National Gallery of Art. And you know what's the best thing? That this place is also free. So I can just go and hang out and admire some paintings, look at them, try to decipher the meaning behind the painting, the basically the complexity that all these things that are hang on the walls they have. So I highly recommend you guys to visit the National Gallery of Art. The National Gallery of Art, it is in the National Mall. So all of these museums that I have talked to you about are really close to each other. So the next museum that we have, and this is actually the most famous museum and the most, I would say, engaging and interactive. And a lot of people, they think this is the best museum in Washington, D.C. But, I don't have an opinion on that because I like all of them. All of them are very unique. So this is the National Air and Space Museum. In this museum, you have prototypes of airplanes that were used, in different times of the United States. You also have the prototype of the the NASA spaceship that they used to go to the moon. This museum is very interactive. It is very fun. It is the most famous museum in Washington, D.C., and it is also free. A lot of people travel long distances from different states, different countries, just to come and visit this museum. The bookstore, or actually the museum store or the souvenir store in this museum, it is very fun because they sell astronauts food. So they sell packaged food that has been dried up, and you can taste the food that the astronauts were eating when they went to the moon. You can also buy like astronauts gear, astronauts equipment. And yes, so this museum, it is beautiful. I highly recommend you guys to go to this museum as well. It is also very close to the National Gallery of Art. It is close. It is in the in the basically it is in the same area where the National Mall is at. So go to this museum, please. So the next museum that we have is the National Museum of Natural History. So in this museum, you have prototypes of, or basically statues that look very realistic of animals. So in this picture, we have this elephant. This elephant looks very realistic. This museum is very educational because it covers the theory of evolution that science proposes. It covers the history of animals. It covers the history of humans. Because, as you guys may know, the history of animals is also the history of humans. So, the history of animals is our history too. So, this museum, it covers all of that. And you can see beautiful statues of animals. It is very big and it is very interactive. You can learn a lot from this museum. So the next thing that we have is another memorial. So this memorial is for Martin Luther King Jr. So Martin Luther King Jr. was a social activist during the 1960s. So he was the leader of the civil rights movement. As you guys may know, African American people, so black people, have suffered a lot in the United States. They have suffered from slavery, but they have also suffered from discrimination and unfair laws. So during the 1960s, the United States Supreme Court passed a law in which they stated that African American people and white people, they could not go to the same school. So they could not coexist in the same environment. So basically they said that they were going to be separated but equal. So white people, if you were white, you had to go to a white school. If you were black, or basically another word for black in the United States is African American. So if you were African American, you had to go to a African American school. So whites and blacks, they couldn't basically be in the same place at the same time. So they couldn't study together in the same school. So this caused a lot of discrimination against black people, and this caused a lot of unfairness towards black people. Black people suffer from low income. They were placed in really bad communities. They didn't have a lot of resources. In the schools, they were, they didn't have the optimum entities for African American kids to succeed. They didn't have like equal resources basically. So this guy, Martin Luther King Jr., he advocated for the rights of African American people. And unfortunately, in the United States, when you become an activist and you make a social change, like Abraham Lincoln, he did something very significant. He freed the slaves. He was assassinated. Malcolm X was another activist. He was assassinated. And in this case, Martin Luther King Jr., he was also assassinated because he was advocating. He was advocating for his own people. He was making a social change. So, as you guys can tell, we have covered all the touristic places of Washington, D.C. that are located in the downtown area. And you guys may think, oh, Washington, D.C. is a very historic city. It is kind of boring. I'm not into that. But you know what? Washington, D.C. does not only have, museums and monuments. It also has a beautiful neighborhood called Georgetown. So this is a beautiful neighborhood in Washington, D.C. This is the Georgetown neighborhood. This neighborhood, it is very beautiful. As you can see, you have a different type of architecture. You have houses that are really close to each other. Everything is very organized. Everything coexists in harmony in this place. This is also a very touristic city, and this is not too far away from the monuments. So the Georgetown neighborhood is another place that I highly recommend you guys to visit. So if you guys can take a look at the picture, you guys can see a big building. This building that is in the middle of the picture. The building that has like a yellow, you know, ceiling. So this is a bank. But this building, it is very famous and it is becoming a touristic attraction as well. Do you guys know why? You guys may be wondering, why is this building like this looks very old? Why are people so interested in, taking a picture in front of this building? So this building became famous because it appeared in a Hollywood movie. The Hollywood movie that this building was in, it was in the first Transformers movie. So a lot of people, when they, walk past this building, they recognize it and they take a picture in front of it. It is very aesthetically pleasing. It is very beautiful. So the Georgetown neighborhood is another place that you guys have to go to. You guys have to visit this place because it is very, very beautiful. So, like I was saying before, Washington, D.C. has a different architecture. So the houses are, really next to each other. There's no space between them. So this style of houses are called row houses. ROW, row houses. And this houses is, something very unique in Washington, D.C. I have not seen houses like this in other states of the United States. So this is something very emblematic from Washington, D.C. We have more pictures of the row houses right here. We have more pictures of the row houses right here as well. So as you can see, Washington, D.C. has a lot of things, but everything coexists in harmony. So you have a sidewalk, you have the row houses, you have a parking spot on the streets, you have the bike lane where, if you're, cycling through Washington, D.C., you can go through this bike lane, and you have the road. And this picture was taken either during the fall season or the winter season. Washington, D.C., it is also a beautiful city because it has different seasons. You have summer, you have spring, you have fall, and you have winter in Washington, D.C. During fall, my favorite season is fall because you can see the trees changing the color of the leaves, and the leaves, they start to, fall down. It is very beautiful to look at. And the weather, it can get a little bit colder. It gets cold, but not too cold as the winter. So the next touristic attraction that Washington, D.C. has to offer is the famous Georgetown University. The Georgetown University is located in the Georgetown neighborhood. The Georgetown neighborhood was the first neighborhood that was founded in Washington, D.C., and it was named after the first president of the United States, which was George Washington. So the Georgetown neighborhood, it is a very prestigious university. A lot of people who have become very successful in history have gone or have attended this university. Some of those people have been Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was the president of the United States during the 90s. Another famous person who attended this university was Bradley Cooper. Bradley Cooper is a famous actor nowadays. And many other people from different countries, like Ivan Duque, he went to this university. Different presidents from different countries. All the people who work in the Supreme Court, they went to this university as well. And many people who work in the Senate, many people who work in the government, for the United States. So Washington, D.C. has also, this university that is very prestigious, and it is also a touristic attraction. It is very beautiful. As you can see, this building, is it looks like a castle, you know. It has like a gothic type of look. Many people say that this building looks like Hogwarts from Harry Potter. I can see that, you know. So yes, so Washington D.C. also offers superb education. So you guys should stay in my Airbnb because it offers a lot of touristic attractions. It is very economical. Um, my Airbnb offers all the utilities that you need. It offers Wi-Fi. It offers, you know, all the basic things like a washing machine, um, a bed to stay in. It offers cooking utensils, and you are going to stay in a beautiful city that is Washington D.C. Washington D.C. It is a very modern city with friendly people. There are lots of tall buildings in Washington D.C. The streets are clean and there are squares with big statues. There are lots of museums, nice cafes, and restaurants too. Washington, D.C. is fantastic. It is a great place to visit, and I hope that you guys can stay in my Airbnb.